regardless of how you feel about trade deadline, go down to the ballpark on August 8th and celebrate Ozzie Guillen, just one of the genuine good guys, the Sox lifer. Like, no doubt about where his loyalties stand as far as the South Side of Chicago. Even when he didn't care for Jerry Reinsdorf, Kenny Williams, all them for a while, he still loved us. So, Nick, you got to give some energy to this podcast. And what better than your favorite Ozzie Guillen story?
Yeah, this one, it's just a story that I think really encapsulates the energy that he brought and kind of the eyeballs he brought on the White Sox at the time. So it's not like best memory, it's like to me it's the funniest one. And it's a game in the 2011 season against the Yankees. Guillen got ejected pretty early for arguing balls and strikes. And after he was ejected, but while the game was still going on, he goes and he tweets, "This is going to cost me a lot of money. This is pathetic." And then he gets suspended by Major League Baseball for using social media during a game, and I assume also for criticizing the umpiring of said game. So it just like it's honestly, this is 2011, so he's like ahead of his time. Like the concept of somebody taking to Twitter to complain about an umpire, a manager at that, like that's something that I feel like is very like 2026 coded. But here he was 15 years ago doing it. So I just think it's a funny story that kind of shows like how passionate he was about the team and how he was not willing to like, take crap from people. I always respected that about him.
Dude, if you think about the Wild West that was Twitter when it first came out, like that was just built for Ozzie Guillen because that's exactly who he is. Like if you couldn't make a more perfect social media platform where it's like I can say whatever I want and I can get out to everybody. I don't have to deal with friend requests, anything. Everyone can just see everything I'm saying. Sign me up. I'm going to do half this tweet in English, the rest in Spanish, and I'm going to swear multiple times and call out the umpire that just threw me out of this fucking game. I apologize. I mean, I feel like you earn a swear when you're talking about Ozzie Guillen, no, but Les, give us your best story.
So I want to make sure we hit some of the obvious ones because we talked about this beforehand and none of us mentioned some of the obvious ones. I want to make sure get mentioned. The Jenks in 05 when he was pulling him into the game. Anytime he mentioned the Cubs in general. I think one thing about that is funny because a lot of, I was thinking about this today, a lot of Cubs fans don't understand, like, why does Sox fans have so much hate for the Cubs? It really doesn't go the other way around as much. And you think about who the White Sox manager was for a good portion of when a lot of fans were growing up, and how he talked about the Cubs. Like he had a lot of say in how a lot of us grew up thinking about the Cubs. And sure, some of us don't feel the same way as others, but the largest opinion of like hating the Cubs as much as a lot of Sox fans do, I feel like a lot of that had to do with Ozzie.
He did share, like as a player, he had to share the city with the Cubs. So
right.
It goes deep for him.
So it's like, I thought about that today. I'm like, yeah, I actually kind of get like why it might feel the Cubs fans like, hey, we don't have the same visceral reaction you guys. It's like, well, your manager didn't call your rate field or US Cellular Field a shithole or whatever. So it's like those are the sorts of things. The other two things I want to mention are I have a favor, I promise. These are all the honorable mentions. You can't pull fat, one of my favorite lines ever. These are some of the more recent ones. Most of the 2023 and 4 seasons where they were just terrible and he was just doing whatever he wanted and saying whatever he wanted on air. Even Chuck got into that. Those were great years.
Him and Chuck were great.
And then one last personal one, when we were doing those NBC hits still with the studio, we would do like those pregame and postgame things. He at one point called me Dylan Cease with glasses, and that was pretty fun. My favorites though are both like, as a coach, you can kind of feel it and like understand it. The number one was also from 2011. He had a blow up early in April regarding the bullpen. Just no one was doing well as a closer and things like that. And he was so upset with media. If you watch the clip of like the media, like he's like, yeah, we don't have a closer. We can't really figure out what's going on here. I'm trying everything. It's not working. And then they're like, what about Matt Thornton? What about this guy? What about that guy? And he finally just blows up. And I'm paraphrasing so we don't get demonetized. But when we do well, they send the players out here and you guys treat them like heroes. When we F up, then they send me out here to deal with you guys. And then he just gets up and walks away. It's like, yeah, that's hilarious to me. It's like, And you see how managers deal with it nowadays, where it's like they're so nice about it and deal with it. You don't really see that blow up. They'll deal with the stupid questions. It was funny to see him be like, I'm done dealing with this. And then a line I have used multiple times as a coach: good teams win, horse blank teams have meetings. One of my favorite lines ever. He used it early on when he was a manager, and he brought it up again when the Sox were terrible. That's my favorite quote of all time from him.
I used to always love the back and forth between when they would interview the locker room and then they would interview him, or like they would cut it like for the news later in the night, where it would be Ozzie talking about, we're terrible. Like that's my fault. Like I'm obviously not doing enough for these guys. We're awful. And then it would be the players just basically talking about like, yeah, no, Ozzie's been really getting on our case. Like he has no ifs, ands, or buts about telling us when we're doing terrible. So it's funny how Ozzie would like try to protect the guys and try to put the blame on him in the interview, and then the players are like, nah, dog, he's ripping us apart. I think Konerko had a really good one where he was interviewing and he just was like kind of looked off despondent of like, yeah, no, he's been pretty angry lately. One small one. So I have 3 total. First one's going to be super short, and it's going to be when he got asked about Nick Swisher, and he decided to proclaim that he hates Nick Swisher with his heart. And this is years after Nick Swisher ever played a game with the White Sox. That one just hit so good for me because I couldn't stand Nick Swisher his entire time with the White Sox. He hit a home run from both sides of the plates that one game, and that was cool. But besides that, it was like, this is a guy that is the reason why Scott Podsednik's not here. And that's how I always viewed him. So glad he did that. And he's the fake. Nick Swisher's just the fakest guy on baseball TV. But I don't want to get into a big war of words with Nick Swisher. But there's the 2 ones that always stick out to me, and both of them were during his managing days. One is a story that's come up. I believe Jeff Cox told the story. You could find the YouTube video very easily, but both these kind of go into the relationship he really had with his players. You know, it's so easy to look from the outside and see Ozzie as just this authoritarian. He gets mad at everything. He's angry. Like he knew how to deal with big personalities, and that's what made him successful in Chicago. And it was because he was such a big personality himself that who are you? Like, I'm Ozzie Guillen, dog. And AJ Przinsky, not top one. You know, the way Jeff Cox put this was, you know, if AJ is struggling, you know, he's miserable. If AJ's hitting good, he's still miserable. You know, and you know, it's a story that's as old as time when you talk about AJ Przinsky and the teams he's been on. Like, he's found ways to rub a lot of people the wrong way. He was always voted the most hated player in baseball for a reason. But Ozzie Guillen found a way to get this guy to stick in Chicago as long as he did. And it was because he was able to deal with them. So the story goes, AJ was just on a cold streak from all hell and, you know, strikes out the first time in the game, grabs his helmet, throws it down the hallway. Ozzie doesn't say anything. He doesn't move, doesn't even look at AJ. Second time, AJ strikes out again, walks to the hallway, throws his helmet down there. Finally, Ozzie just gets up and he says, hey, all right, so I'm going to ad lib so I don't swear because we're trying to be monetized. You MFer, you throw that freaking helmet down the hallway again. It's really hard to do actually without swearing. You throw that down there again, you hit somebody, I'm gonna unlife you. Basically, is like, don't you dare throw that helmet down the hallway again. So sure enough, the third at bat, AJ Przinsky goes to the plate. He strikes out again. He's wearing the sombrero. Ozzie walks over waiting for AJ to come into the dugout because he's just ready to lose his mind on him when he's, you know, because AJ's going to throw the freaking helmet. AJ doesn't throw the helmet. Instead, takes it off, hands it to Ozzie. Ozzie immediately throws it down the hallway and starts snapping on AJ. But like, that's the type of thing. That's why he is so endeared, and that's why he's so loved, is because he could deal with the most difficult player in baseball. You know, depending on who you ask, it was always AJ Przinsky for us growing up. Everyone hated AJ if you weren't a White Sox fan, and he found ways to deal with him, and that's how you kind of deal with him. And then the third one, just because he did it for my boy Mark Burley, and it was the ejection when Joe West decided, I'm just, screw Mark Burley today. We're in Cleveland. I'm going to call balks on him every time he even looks at first base. So gets the first balk. Ozzie just starts smiling from the dugout. He's just laughing. He's like, Joe West, typical freaking Joe West, because, Ozzie and Joe West's history is fantastic. If you didn't already know, if you didn't grow up in that era, by all means, just toss a Google search and you'll find plenty. And then the second balk, Mark Burley, not a very emotional person on the mound, just lightly throws his glove down like, what? You got to be kidding. Joe West immediately just all the girth up here, throws him out. Sorry, I love Joe West. I had to really emphasize that. So then you see Ozzie, kind of go up from the dugout again. He's kind of got that smile on his face again. He's like, oh, did that really just happen? You really just threw Mark out. And then there's a pause. And then Ozzie just, he's about to walk away from the dugout, and then he just walks up the stairs. And you know exactly where this is about to go. Mark's trying to just, let Ozzie do his thing. Mark's already thrown out of the game, so he's just going to, get the entertainment here. And Ozzie walks up again, just perfect gentleman. He's like, so what, a balk? Okay. Why is Burley out? Well, throwing down his glove and everything like that. Joe West trying to explain it, the country boy Joe West, the way he would do it. And, Ozzie just still got a smile on his face, Ozzie turns around to walk away from Joe West, turns right back around, and immediately just snaps. Like, there is no chill, 0 to 100. Ozzie was just trying to casually understand this, and then just snaps on Joe West. I've never seen Joe West throw anybody out as fast as he immediately threw out Ozzie the second he got the first two words out. But then Ozzie just stood there, obviously got his money's worth, probably told Joe West about how much of a joke he is and that he's going to buy his country album, all that type of deal. And dude, it was the best. I mean, you could go on for days with stories of Ozzie Guillen. You could talk about, I just saw Alexi Ramirez's name in here. You could talk about him stomping home plate against the Cubs and kicking Soto's helmet, which was hysterical. I mean, there's so much there, but the fact that we could all sit around and potentially, tell these stories for hours, whether it's from our perspective or, hearing a player talk about Ozzie, it shows how much he meant to not only the South Side of Chicago, not only to White Sox fans, but to the players that he constantly coached. And that's why you're not going to find a whole lot besides, Nick Swisher, who's going to have a bad thing to say about Ozzie Guillen as a coach, no matter how high he got onto their case. So
and I think between all of us, all the things we mentioned, and then in the chat, a few different ones that we didn't even think to mention. Craig did say calling for Jenks was the thing he thought of, Craig WD. And that was just one of my honorable mentions. And Tommy Weil, Hey Eaton, no one likes you. That was a good one, from Adam Eaton's stint with the team. And then you had previously mentioned Tanfina 8348 calling Alexi Ramirez the Cuban Missile, but it sounded like Cuban Measle. All of those things. Just again, it's you love him, you hate him. It's what made Ozzie Ozzie. And it's cool to see that again. We went through a whole bunch of ones each ourselves, and fans each have their own ones that are completely different. It speaks to the character that he was and the impact he made, and why he gets his number retired at the end of the day.
Yeah, and before we move on, I just wanted to say I want to commend Duke for figuring out a way to retell that Brzezinski story somehow without all the expletives. I honestly don't know how he did that.
Without us losing every dollar we could possibly make.
Listen, Jeff Cox, you can find the YouTube video very easily. Jeff Cox tells that story electrically, all the physical comedy, everything like that. But yeah, I was struggling with that coming in because I'm like, this is a story I'm going to tell, but how in the world am I going to tell this story? But yeah, I mean, that's Ozzie Guillen, man. It's a guy who, grew up here. He grew up as a South Sider, and no matter how much stuff was thrown his way, he always stood his ground. He was always willing to go to bat for his players. And, I mean, what more can you really ask for? I mean, whether it was the ejections you loved about him, whether it was Ozzie Ball of him just trying to get a jump every single game because he knew he had a leadoff hitter and Tadahito Gucci in the 2-hole and, you know, Paul Konerko, Jermaine Dye. You could go all day. Guy knew what he was doing. He had his plan every single game. And mind you, when he was interviewing for the White Sox job, he was completely hammered from the night before. So like,
I know you don't even mention that one, and it's
if you can't relate, there's a great video on YouTube of that too, of Ozzie telling that story. So I can't even do it justice. But if you can't relate to that, man, how are you Southsider? How are you White Sox fan? You know, walking into an interview just a little hungover. You know, it's just Ozzie. This is your freaking dream job, man.
Just like Duke's weekend, to tie it all the way back to the beginning. Just like Duke's weekend.
No, it was a fun weekend. But what do you think, boys?
I think we're good. I, as always, want to thank the chat for being so awesome. It's been cool to see the continued engagement, some new folks, some of the folks who are the same that we recognize every time. So thanks for engagement. Make sure to like the stream on your way out this evening. But truly, truly always a pleasure with you boys, and also with the chat again. You guys have been awesome. So thanks for a fun episode.
I love you with my heart.
I do most days.